It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was sitting across from a dealership finance manager. I was 28 years old, exhausted from a long commute in a breaking down sedan, and I just wanted something that worked. The air conditioning in the office was freezing. The leather chair squeaked every time I shifted my weight. He slid a piece of paper across the desk, showing a 72-month loan with a monthly payment of $726. What I did not know at the time was that signing that piece of paper would quietly steal over $2.5 million from my future net worth. My name is Mark, and I spend way too much time obsessing over the invisible financial anchors that keep normal people from ever building real wealth. If you are someone who feels like you are making good money but somehow never actually getting ahead, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Because today, I am not talking about clipping coupons or skipping your morning coffee. I want to talk about the single most normalized, socially acceptable piece of debt in the modern world. I want to talk about how it is mathematically engineered to keep you working a decade longer than you have to. And I know it because I have been exactly where you are standing right now. At the time, I was making $65,000 a year as a mid-level marketing manager. I thought I was doing everything right. I got the promotion. I moved to a slightly nicer apartment. Naturally, I thought it was time to upgrade my car. Everyone around me had a car payment. My boss had one. My coworkers had one. My parents always had one. It just felt like a standard monthly subscription for being a working adult in America. The finance manager smiled at me and asked what monthly payment I was looking for. I told him I wanted to keep it under $500. He clicked his mouse a few times. He looked at his screen. He told me that with my down payment and credit score, we were looking at $726 a month. But he quickly added that this was for a beautiful, fully loaded SUV that would last me years. I hesitated. It felt heavy. But I looked out the window at my old car sitting in the trade-in lot. I thought about the rattling noise the engine made on the highway. I told myself I had earned it. I worked hard. I deserved a reliable vehicle. So I picked up the pen and I signed my name. I drove off the lot feeling like a completely new person. I loved the new car smell. I loved the Bluetooth connection. I loved pulling into the parking lot at work the next morning. But that high only lasted about 3 weeks. Then the first bill arrived in the mail. $726. Suddenly, my $65,000 salary felt incredibly small. After taxes and health insurance, my take-home pay was about $3,900 a month. My rent was $1,600. Now, almost 20% of my remaining money was vanishing into a piece of metal. A piece of metal that was dropping in value every time I drove it to the grocery store. I sat down at my kitchen table and started doing the forensic accounting on my own life. I multiplied $726 by 72 months, $52,272. I was paying over $52,000 for a car with a sticker price of $38,000. The interest alone was going to cost me over $14,000. And that is the moment everything changed for me. That was the moment I realized this was not bad luck. This was math. I thought the car payment was just a temporary hurdle. I figured in 6 years, I would own it outright and be completely free. But when I started looking closely at the numbers, and specifically at how the entire automotive industry is structured, I realized the truth was much darker. The system is not designed to give you a car you eventually own. The system is designed to keep you making a payment for the rest of your natural life. I was walking willingly into a financial cage that almost no one ever escapes. I had been calling it the endless car loan for months in my own head. I did not know it had a name until I started really digging into this. When I finally went looking, I found out it was called the Perpetual Payment Trap. One night, I came across a 2019 report from the Federal Reserve on household debt and credit. I used to think that most people paid off their cars and kept them running without a payment for a decade. Then I found a statistic in that Federal Reserve data showing that Americans hold over $1.5 trillion in auto loan debt. I read that twice. $1.5 trillion. That meant practically an entire country was operating on the assumption that a car payment was just like a utility bill. It had become a permanent fixture in the middle-class budget, a monthly tax on simply getting to work. At first, I only saw this part, and I thought I understood it. This is layer 1 of the perpetual payment trap. It is the simple math of buying a heavily depreciating asset with money you do not actually have. Let me walk you through exactly what happened to my $38,000 SUV during that first year. I drove it off the dealership lot. The second the tires hit the public street, it lost roughly 10% of its value. $3,800 vanished into thin air on the 10-minute drive home. By the end of the first 12 months, it had lost 20% of its original value. My brand new vehicle was now worth around $30,400, but my loan balance had barely moved. I was paying $726 every month. Out of that monthly payment, a huge chunk in the beginning was going straight to the bank as interest. I was paying premium interest on an asset that was bleeding value every single day it sat in my apartment parking lot. When someone first explained the concept of negative equity to me, my stomach dropped. Negative equity is when you owe the bank more on the vehicle than the vehicle is actually worth if you try to sell it. Because of my 72-month loan term, I was completely underwater on my car for the first 4 years I owned it. If I lost my marketing job in year 3 and desperately needed to sell the car to lower my expenses, I could not just hand over the keys and walk away. I would actually have to write a check to the bank for thousands of dollars just to get rid of my own vehicle. I was trapped. I could not sell it without taking a massive cash loss, and I was locked into sending them $726 every 30 days, no matter what happened in my life. But the automotive industry knows exactly how this math works. They built the entire system around it. They know exactly when you are going to feel the pain of an aging vehicle. They know when your bumper-to-bumper warranty is about to expire. They know how to send you an offer in the mail right when you are tired of doing maintenance. I thought the monthly payment and the rapid depreciation were the worst parts of the deal. I thought I saw the whole picture. But when I dug deeper into my own bank statements, I realized the trap was built with financial walls I had not even noticed yet. The true cost of the vehicle was not just the loan payment sitting on auto pay. It was the invisible string of mandatory expenses tied directly to that specific financing contract I signed. And those hidden costs were draining my checking account much faster than the car payment itself. I knew buying a new car meant losing some money to depreciation. I knew it. Most people know it, but I kept doing it anyway because I thought I could afford the monthly payment. At first, I only saw this part, and I thought I understood it. I want to walk you through the actual math of what was happening to my bank account during that first year of ownership. Because looking at a single monthly payment completely hides the true violence of what you're doing to your net worth. Let us look at my real numbers. I was earning $65,000 a year. After taxes, health insurance, and retirement contributions, my actual take-home pay was $3,900 a month. My rent was $1,600. My groceries and basic utilities took another $600. That left me with $1,700 to live my life, save for emergencies, and build my future. Then the bank took $726 out of that pile for the car. Almost 43% of my disposable income was gone before I even woke up on the first of the month. I want to paint a picture of what giving up 43% of your disposable income actually feels like in real life. It meant I stopped going out with my friends on Friday nights because I did not want to spend $40 on dinner. It meant I delayed going to the dentist because I did not have the $200 for the copay. It meant I was living paycheck to paycheck on a $65,000 salary. I was driving a beautiful, shiny SUV to a job I felt stressed at, simply because I needed the job to pay for the SUV. I was literally working to fund my commute. And what was I getting in return for surrendering nearly half of my free cash flow? I was buying an asset that was actively destroying its own value. Let us look at the depreciation math step by step. My loan was for $38,000 at roughly 6% interest over 72 months. In the first year, I made 12 payments of $726. That is $8,712 in total cash out of my pocket. But because of how loans are amortized, almost $2,000 of that went straight to interest. It did not pay down the principal at all. Meanwhile, the car lost 20% of its value in that same 12 months. So, my $38,000 vehicle was now worth roughly $30,400. I had paid the bank almost $9,000 in cash, but my actual net worth had dropped by nearly $8,000 because of the depreciation. I was paying top dollar to finance my own financial decline. By year 3, the math gets even more depressing. I had paid the bank $26,136 in total monthly payments. I looked at my loan statement. I still owed $20,000 on the loan. I looked up the trade-in value of my car online. It was worth $18,000. After 3 years of perfect, on-time payments, giving up nearly half of my disposable income every single month, I was completely underwater. If I wanted to sell the car, I would have had to write a $2,000 check just to break even. I sat at my kitchen table looking at these numbers. I thought this was the whole trap. I thought the perpetual payment trap was just about losing money to depreciation and interest. I figured if I could just tough it out for 3 more years, the car would be mine and the bleeding would stop. But when I dug deeper, I found something that most people never notice. Because the bank does not just demand a monthly payment, they demand complete control over how you maintain and protect their asset. And those hidden, mandated costs were quietly pulling hundreds of extra dollars out of my pocket every single month. But when I dug deeper, I found something that most people never notice. I thought the monthly payment of $726 was my only real commitment to the bank. I was wrong. When you finance a vehicle, you do not actually own it. The bank owns it. And because their name is on the title, they get to dictate exactly how you protect their asset. They do this through mandatory comprehensive and collision insurance. Before I bought the SUV, I was driving an older sedan. I owned it outright, so I only carried liability insurance. That cost me roughly $60 a month. When I sat down to insure my new $38,000 vehicle, the insurance agent told me the bank required full coverage with a low deductible. My new premium was $185 a month. That was an extra $125 vanishing from my checking account every 30 days. Over the 72 months of the loan, that mandatory insurance upgrade alone was going to cost me exactly $9,000. I used to think that the monthly payment was the only fixed cost that mattered when calculating if I could afford a car. Then I found a 2022 report from the American Automobile Association on the true cost of driving. I read it and felt slightly sick. The report showed that the average hidden carrying cost of a new vehicle, factoring in full coverage insurance, financing charges, taxes, and registration, adds over $1,200 a year to your baseline expenses compared to an older car. I read that twice. People were budgeting for a $500 car payment, but the vehicle was actually pulling hundreds of dollars more out of their pockets in invisible fees. I looked at my own life to see if this was true. My state charges vehicle registration taxes based on the current value of the car. For my old sedan, I paid about $45 a year to renew my tags. When the bill came for the new SUV, the property tax and registration fee was $620. That is another $50 a month I had to set aside. Then came the maintenance. When you buy a brand new car, the dealership puts intense psychological pressure on you to maintain it at their service center to protect the warranty. With my old car, I went to a local mechanic who charged me $40 for an oil change. Now, I was sitting in a dealership waiting room with free gourmet coffee, paying $115 for the exact same service. I realized the free coffee was costing me $75 a cup. I looked at my coworker sitting next to me at the office. He was driving a $50,000 truck. I suddenly realized he was likely paying over $1,300 a month in total carrying costs. We were both making the same $65,000 salary. We were both completely broke. But we looked incredibly wealthy in the company parking lot. I sat down and added it all up. $726 for the loan, $185 for the mandated insurance, $50 a month for the elevated taxes. My real monthly cost was not $726. My real monthly cost was $961. Almost $1,000 a month was quietly bleeding out of my life to support a single vehicle. That was nearly 25% of my entire take-home pay going strictly to transportation. I felt the walls of the trap closing in on me. I was trapped in a cycle of working just to pay for the car that got me to work. But even then, I did not understand the true violence of what I was doing to my future. I thought the damage was limited to the money leaving my account right then. I thought the worst-case scenario was simply being broke in my 20s. And this is the part that took me years to figure out. The part nobody tells you. And this is the part that took me years to figure out. The part nobody tells you. I thought the damage was contained strictly to the money leaving my account right then. I assumed that once the loan was finally paid off, I could just start building my wealth then. I was completely blind to the single most important concept in personal finance: opportunity cost. I used to think opportunity cost was just a theoretical idea that finance professors talked about in college. Then I found a paper published by the National Bureau of Economic Research about compounding interest and middle-class wealth gaps. I read their breakdown on how early capital deployment dictates your late-life net worth. It showed that a single dollar invested in your 20s is worth drastically more than a dollar invested in your 40s. I sat down at my kitchen table with a blank piece of paper and a compound interest calculator. I wanted to know exactly what I had given up. I took my exact car payment, $726. I asked myself what would happen if I had kept driving my old clunker and invested that exact amount into a basic S&P 500 index fund every single month instead. I used a conservative 8% annual return. I started writing the numbers down step by step. After 10 years of investing that $726 a month, my account would hold over $133,000. That is enough money to put a massive down payment on a house in almost any city. After 20 years, the number grew to $428,000. That is enough money to pay for college for multiple kids or to quit a stressful job and start a business. After 30 years, the account would sit at over $1.08 million. And after 40 years, the length of a standard working career, that single monthly car payment turned into $2.5 million. I stopped writing. I stared at the paper. My hands were actually cold. I walked outside my apartment to the parking lot. I looked at my shiny $38,000 SUV sitting under the yellow street lamp. I realized I had literally traded $2.5 million of future wealth for heated leather seats and a touchscreen dashboard. I was going to have to work an extra decade of my life just to pay for the privilege of driving that specific car in my 20s. But the trap is even more aggressive than a single car purchase. Because the automotive industry knows exactly how to keep you from ever reaching that wealth-building phase. They know that if you ever stop making a car payment, you might realize how rich you could become. I used to think people kept their cars for years after the loan was finished. Then I found a report from Edmunds showing that the average American trades in their vehicle every 71 months. My loan was for 72 months. That means the average person walks into a dealership right before their car is actually paid off. They trade it in while they often still owe money. They roll that negative equity into a brand new loan. And they start the 72-month clock all over again. They never stop paying. They just keep renting a depreciating asset from the bank for their entire adult life. They forfeit millions of dollars in future wealth for the temporary feeling of a new car smell every 6 years. And when I looked at my true carrying cost, the $961 a month, including the mandated insurance and taxes, the math became completely horrifying. If I invested that true monthly cost over 40 years, it equaled over $3.3 million. I realized my $65,000 salary was never going to make me rich, because the system had successfully convinced me to voluntarily hand over my primary wealth-building tool to a bank. And the worst part was, I had done it to myself with a smile on my face. I was staring down the barrel of 40 years of financial slavery. I had to find a way out, but I did not know how. I sat down at my computer and opened a blank spreadsheet. I needed to see the two realities side by side. I needed to look at the exact mathematical difference between the path I was on and the path I could choose to take. Path 1 was the American standard, the life I was currently living. Path 2 was the mathematical alternative, the path where I opted out of the perpetual payment trap entirely. I modeled both paths over a 30-year timeline. I wanted to see exactly where I would end up at 58 years old. Let us look at path 1 first. On this path, I keep my $38,000 SUV. I make my $726 payment every month. In 6 years, when the loan is paid off, I do exactly what the automotive industry expects me to do. I trade the car in for a newer model and sign another 72-month contract. I repeat this cycle 5 times over 30 years. Over those 3 decades, I will hand over $261,360 in pure monthly payments to the bank. And what do I have to show for it at the end of 30 years? I have one used vehicle sitting in my driveway worth maybe $15,000. I have zero wealth generated from $250,000 in cash outlays. I am 58 years old and I still have a car payment. And because of inflation, my payment is probably over $1,000 a month by then. I still have to drive to work every single morning because I need the paycheck to cover the car loan. Then I built the columns for path 2. On this path, I do something radical. I sell the shiny SUV. I take the hit on the negative equity. I buy a reliable $10,000 used sedan in cash. I commit to driving that used car for 10 years before buying another one in cash. I take my $726 monthly payment and I automatically route it into an S&P 500 index fund every single month. I never stop. I treat that investment like a bill I owe to my future self. Assuming a historic 8% annual return, the numbers become staggering. At the end of year 10, I have $133,000 in liquid investments. At the end of year 20, my portfolio has grown to $428,000. By the time I hit year 30, the math breaks the entire system wide open. I have $1.08 million sitting in my brokerage accounts. I stared at the screen. I put the 2 outcomes right next to each other. Outcome 1 leaves me with a depreciating piece of metal and a lifetime of mandatory labor. Outcome 2 leaves me with over $1 million in wealth. The gap between these 2 paths is not just a spreadsheet calculation. The gap is literal freedom. If I take path 2, my portfolio at 58 years old will generate over $80,000 a year in passive growth alone. I could wake up on a Tuesday morning and simply decide never to go back to my marketing job again. I could walk out to my driveway, look at my slightly dusty 10-year-old car, and know that I officially bought my own life back. The cost of that shiny new SUV was not $38,000. The true cost was my freedom. The true cost was forcing myself to work an extra 15 years just to impress strangers in traffic. I felt the full crushing weight of the lifetime cost land on my chest. I knew the math. I knew I had to escape. But I also knew exactly why it was going to be so incredibly hard to actually walk away. I knew the math. I knew I was trading my freedom for a piece of metal. So, why was it so incredibly hard to just sell the vehicle? That was when I finally understood why I kept getting stuck, even when I knew the right answer. The automotive industry does not sell cars. They sell psychology, and they are absolute masters at it. I thought back to the day I bought the SUV. I remembered sitting in that freezing dealership office. The finance manager never once talked about the total price of the vehicle. He never mentioned the $38,000. He only asked me one question. He asked what I could afford to pay each month. This is a psychological trick called framing. The industry knows that human brains are terrible at comprehending massive amounts of debt. $38,000 sounds terrifying, but $726 sounds like a simple budget line item. They take a life-altering amount of debt and chop it up into bite-sized monthly illusions, and I got played completely. I fell for the monthly payment framing because it made me feel like I was in control, but the manipulation goes much deeper than just the numbers on a desk. It taps directly into our primal need for social status. I remember how I felt walking out to my old sedan before I traded it in. I felt slightly embarrassed. I felt like I was falling behind my friends. The system trains us from a young age to tie our self-worth to what we park in the driveway. We are taught that a shiny new car signals to the world that we are successful working adults. The new car smell is literally engineered in a lab to trigger a dopamine response. It is designed to make you feel wealthy, even while the bank is quietly draining your actual wealth. The industry also weaponizes our fear of the unknown. They sell us the illusion of perfect reliability. When I bought my SUV, the salesman talked endlessly about the comprehensive warranty. He painted a terrifying picture of what would happen if my old car broke down on the highway. He made me feel like driving a used car was fundamentally irresponsible. I paid $38,000 for peace of mind, but I was actually paying a massive premium for a mathematically guaranteed financial loss. The fear of a random $500 repair bill pushed me into a guaranteed $8,000 annual depreciation loss. The math made absolutely no sense, but the psychology was incredibly effective. I experienced this manipulation firsthand. About 6 months after I bought the SUV, I took it back to the dealership for its first scheduled maintenance. I was sitting in the comfortable waiting room drinking their gourmet coffee. A salesman in a sharp suit walked up to me. He smiled and introduced himself. He told me that my specific SUV was in incredibly high demand. He said they desperately needed used inventory. Then he delivered the pitch. He told me he could get me into the brand new, upgraded model, the one with the panoramic sunroof and the premium sound system. And he promised he could keep my monthly payment exactly the same. Keep your payment exactly the same. That is the single most dangerous sentence in the modern financial world. I felt a rush of excitement. I actually considered it. But because I had just run the lifetime math at my kitchen table, I saw the trap clearly. He was not offering me a good deal. He was offering to roll my negative equity into a brand new loan. He was offering to reset my 72-month clock entirely back to zero. He wanted to trap me in debt for another 6 years just so I could look at the sky through a piece of glass. He was trying to ensure I never reached the day where I actually owned the car outright. I smiled, politely declined, and walked out of the dealership. But my hands were shaking. Even knowing the math, the psychological pull of the upgrade was terrifyingly strong, because there is a very real fear that keeps us locked in these expensive payments. Let me say out loud the objection that is forming in your head right now, because it used to form in mine every single time I thought about driving a cheaper car. Let me say out loud the objection that is forming in your head right now. Because it used to form in mine every single time I thought about driving a cheaper car. When someone first told me I should be driving a $10,000 used car, my immediate reaction was anger. I thought about the freezing winters. I thought about the dark highway commutes. I told myself I could not afford to be stranded on the side of the road. I needed a reliable vehicle to get to my marketing job. If my cheap car broke down and I missed an important client meeting, I could get fired. I convinced myself that my $726 monthly payment was not a luxury. I told myself it was job security. It was a safety tax. It was the responsible adult thing to do. And I understand exactly what you are thinking right now. I thought the exact same thing. We are terrified of the unknown mechanic bill. But when I sat down and looked at the actual math of car repairs, my entire argument fell apart. I found a report from the American Automobile Association about the average cost of unexpected vehicle repairs. It showed that a typical surprise repair bill is between $500 and $600. Even a catastrophic repair, like a blown transmission on a used sedan, might cost $3,000. I looked at those numbers. Then I looked at my loan statement. I was paying the bank $8,712 every single year in base payments. I was paying another $2,220 a year in mandated comprehensive insurance. The counterintuitive truth hit me right in the face. A car payment is a guaranteed financial breakdown every single month. I was prepaying nearly $11,000 a year to avoid a hypothetical $3,000 repair bill. I was paying 100% of a massive bill just to avoid a 10% chance of a smaller bill. And the worst part was, even with a brand new car, I still had to pay for regular maintenance like tires and brakes. I was absolutely terrible at assessing risk. I thought the risk was an old car breaking down on a Tuesday morning. The real risk was waking up at 65 years old and realizing I had to keep working because I gave all my wealth to a bank in my 20s. I realized that the fear of a breakdown is a psychological weapon. It is used by the automotive industry to keep us voluntarily poor. Once you build an emergency fund of $3,000, a used car breaking down is no longer a financial disaster. It is simply a temporary inconvenience. You call a tow truck, you take an Uber to work, you pay the mechanic, and you still finish the year thousands of dollars richer than the guy driving the brand new SUV. I had been defending a financial prison because the bars were painted silver and the seats were heated. I had to stop lying to myself about what was actually responsible. Once I accepted this uncomfortable truth, I knew exactly what I needed to do. But getting out of the trap was going to require doing something that terrified me. I had to kill my ego. I had to kill my ego. The first thing I did was confront the exact numbers of my own prison. I sat on my couch on a Saturday morning and called the bank that held my loan. I navigated the automated menu until I finally got a human being on the line. I asked them for my exact 10-day payoff quote. The number was $28,400. Then, I opened my laptop and checked the private party sale value of my exact SUV. It was worth $25,000. I was $3,400 underwater. If I traded it in to a dealership, they would only give me $22,000, which would make the hole even deeper. The second step I took was figuring out how to cover that negative equity gap so I could sell the car myself. I stopped going out to eat entirely. I paused my retirement contributions temporarily. I sold my old electronics online. It took me 4 months of aggressive saving to scrape together the $3,400 in cash. Once I had the money sitting in my checking account, I listed the SUV for sale by owner. It took 3 weeks of dealing with annoying text messages and lowball offers. But finally, a buyer agreed to take it for $25,000. We walked into my bank together. He handed the teller a check for $25,000. I authorized the bank to pull the remaining $3,400 from my own savings. The teller stamped the paperwork. The loan was officially closed. I handed the buyer the keys and walked out of the bank with absolutely nothing. No car, no savings, just an empty parking space at my apartment. But for the first time in years, I did not owe a bank a single dime for transportation. The third thing I changed was how I viewed my next vehicle. I took the bus to work for a month while I saved up for my next 2 paychecks. Then I found a 10-year-old sedan on an online marketplace. It had 80,000 miles on it. The paint was slightly faded on the hood. I bought it for $7,500 in pure cash. And that is when I felt the first real sign of escape. The next month, the first of the month rolled around. I logged into my checking account, expecting to see the massive car payment deduction. There was nothing. My $726 stayed completely in my account. Then I called my insurance agent. Because I owned the 10-year-old sedan outright, I dropped the mandated full coverage and switched to basic liability. My insurance bill instantly dropped from $185 a month to $62 a month. My vehicle registration renewal came in the mail. Instead of $620, it was $55. By doing nothing more than driving a boring car, I had instantly injected almost $900 of free cash flow back into my life every single month. I felt like I had received a massive promotion at my marketing job. But I knew that having the extra cash flow was only half the solution. If I just took that extra $900 and started buying nicer clothes or eating at expensive restaurants, the money would still be gone. I would just be trading a car payment for a lifestyle payment. I had to take that exact payment and weaponize it for my future. The fourth step I took was completely automating my new reality. I went online and opened a standard brokerage account. I linked my checking account directly to the new investment account. Then I set up an automatic transfer for the first of every single month. I set the amount to exactly $726. That was the exact amount I had been sending to the bank for the shiny SUV. I told the brokerage to automatically invest that money into a basic S&P 500 index fund. I did not wait to see if I had money left over at the end of the month. I treated my future freedom like a mandatory car payment. The first month that $726 hit my investment account, it felt incredibly small. I looked at the balance on my screen. It was less than $1,000. I looked out my window at my slightly faded 10-year-old sedan. For a brief second, my ego flared up. I wondered if I had made a huge mistake. But then I remembered the lifetime math I had done at my kitchen table. I was not just saving $726 a month. I was buying my way out of the perpetual payment trap. I was buying back my 30s, my 40s, and my 50s. Let me remind you of the math of what happens when you follow this exact solution. If you keep making that $726 payment to your own index fund, you change your entire family tree. In 10 years, you have roughly $133,000 working for you. In 20 years, you cross $428,000. In 30 years, you are sitting on over $1.08 million. And over a standard 40-year working career, that boring used car decision turns into more than $2.5 million. All from money you were already conditioned to spend. all from money the automotive industry assumes belongs to them. That is the core emotional truth underneath all of these numbers. The system is perfectly designed to make you look rich while keeping you mathematically broke. Every advertisement, every financing offer, and every societal expectation is pulling you toward the trap. They want you to trade your future freedom for heated seats and a touchscreen. They want you to stay on the treadmill forever. I chose to step off the treadmill. I chose to drive a car that does not impress anyone at stoplights. Because the ultimate flex in life is not what you park in your driveway. The ultimate flex is waking up on a Tuesday morning and knowing you do not owe anyone your time. If this video helped you see your finances differently, I want you to hit that like button and subscribe. Every video I make is something I wish someone had told me years earlier. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.